morning again to all of you. And good morning again to the throngs of people watching us live on the internet. The crowds that have gathered around their computers to watch us this morning as we stream live. I'm not accustomed to having to talk to you and to someone else, so this will be interesting today. Today is, as you know, Palm Sunday, but you knew that. What you might not know is that today's a kind of frustrating day. Today's a day that is filled with contrast. Today's a day that is filled with disparities. And today's a day that is filled with collisions. Collisions of what I'm going to call contradictions. You see, these contradictions begin with a parade. There is a parade coming. A parade of power and might. A parade that shows the full force of the Roman Empire. A parade that displays the control of the political powers. It is not the parade you thought I was going to preach about. This parade is happening on the other side of town. This parade is happening at the western gate of Jerusalem. This parade has Pontius Pilate coming through the gates of the city. The Roman governor is riding into town on a chariot, surrounded by legions of Roman soldiers. A display of power, a very public showing of exactly who it is who is in control. Pontius Pilate had to show the people who was in control, and he enters into Jerusalem on this day in the full and almighty glory of the Roman Empire. Now, at the same time, on the other side of town, coming in through the eastern gate of Jerusalem, coming down from the Mount of Olives, down past the Garden of Gethsemane, down past the place called the Tombs of the Prophets, there is another parade happening. This is the parade you thought I was going to preach about. As Jesus, the Son of God, rides into Jerusalem on the back of a donkey. Humble, poor, this King of Kings rides into Jerusalem with a small band of followers, heading not to power and glory, but heading to what we would see as a defeat. Defeat at the foot of a cross. Palm Sunday's that kind of day. Palm Sunday's a day filled with contrast, filled with contradictions. And Palm Sunday is a day when those contradictions collide. It is a collision of contradictions. Palm Sunday is a collision of contradictions. As Pilate enters from the west, Jesus enters from the east. Palm Sunday is a collision of contradictions as Pilate enters in full regalia, riding in a chariot, while the King of creation chooses to ride in on the back of a borrowed colt. Palm Sunday is a collision of contradictions as Jesus enters the city in happy triumph, and yet we all know and he knows that he's on the brink of crucifixion. Palm Sunday is a collision of contradictions as the very same people who line that narrow pathway, the very same people who shout Hosanna today, by the end of the week they will be shouting crucify him, they will betray him, they will deny him, they will run away. Yes, today is a day of a collision of contradictions, political, religious, cultural, and very, very personal contradictions. And they collide this day in the heart of Jerusalem. But this ain't no WrestleMania. This ain't no Ultimate Fighting Championship. This ain't even no Donald Trump trying to bully his way into the White House. This is the beginning. It is the beginning of the week that changed the world. And it's the week that changed your lives forever. Let me tell you why. The Rolling Stones, I picked the wrong song because nobody seems to know who the Rolling Stones are. The Rolling Stones once wrote, "You don't always get what you want, but if you try sometimes, you just might find."
You get what you need.
Thank you. You get what you need. Today, in the midst of all the back and forth, in the midst of all the confusion and the contradictions, we might not see and we might not get the God we think we want. But we most certainly get the God we need. You see, today's a day to look at both sides. Today's a day as we look at both sides, we are now invited into this journey, to get into the middle of it, to get into the thick of it, as we walk together through this week and as we peel back the layers of each and every day as we walk to Easter Sunday. Because this week we find the story of a God who defies expectation. We find the story of a God who defies the status quo. This week we see the King of creation riding into our lives on a donkey and then dying on a cross. This ain't the God the people who lined the narrow streets of Jerusalem wanted. And this might not be the God that you think you want either. But Lord knows it is the God that we need, and Lord knows it is the God that we need. I know it's early, but you can throw a little amen back.
Amen.
Man, them people quiet on this day. I know it's cold out. You see, this week we find the God we need. We find a God who weeps for us. We find a God who weeps with us. We find a God who walks with the sinners and the outcasts of this world. This week we find a God who heals our innermost faults. And this week we find a God, yes, of power and glory, but a power and glory that is grounded in love. Yes, love. And we need this God. We need this God. Because this week we find a God who, out of love for us, we find a God who, out of his love for us, forgives us for even the things we don't know we do. We find a God stripped away of all his titles. We find Jesus stripped, bare, and bleeding. And we find Jesus before the powers of this world, that Jesus bowed down and bloody. This might not be the God we think we want, but let me tell you what, Jesus is the God we need. Because with God, we don't always get what we want, but you just might find in Jesus that we get what we need.
Amen.
The pose still works. Actually, I'm going to say that again. We'll see if you do better the second time. With God, we don't always get what we want. But you just might find that with this Jesus, we get exactly what we need.
Amen.
And this Jesus is exactly what we need.
Amen.
There's hope for these people. Today's the beginning. The problem is, yes, there's always a problem. The problem is that a whole lot of us are going to skip to the end of the book. A whole lot of us are going to jump from Palm Sunday to Easter Sunday. We're going to skip the parts in between. It's tempting, but it's also empty. It's enticing, but it's also hollow. It's easy to skip right to dessert, but there ain't any nourishment there. But y'all knew that, didn't you? Sure, we have Palm Sunday triumph, but here's the thing. Without the stuff in the middle, we miss out. Because there's also the Thursday fright and anxiety, the praying in the garden. There's also the Friday that is anything but good. There's also the Saturday of darkness and loneliness. This week is a roller coaster of emotions. just like our lives. Our lives are the ups and the downs of life, the good and the bads of life. It's easy to jump to the end, but you miss the meat, and you miss the heart of the story. And the heart of the story is the heart. The heart is all about the love of God for you. We need the middle.
Amen.
We need the meat. It's okay. We need the full story of a God who comes down, a God who gets dirty with us, a God who walks with us, who hurts with us, who struggles with us, and who dies with us. Yeah, today we might shout out Hosanna with no clue of what or why we are shouting. But Hosanna, if you translate it, literally means God saves us. And that's exactly what this Jesus does. Yes, today is a collision of contradictions, because this is not the God we think we want, but it is the God we need.
Amen.
Stop for a moment this week. Pause. Walk with us. See what our God and His glory is really like. Watch and see and feel the God, my God, your God, who reaches down to us this week and says simply, "This is how much I love you. This is how much I love each and every one of you." Don't miss a moment of it. Because who knows? The ending might even make you say,